How does your background across different fields influence your approach in the science innovation?
So yeah, it's very interesting when my bachelor's and master's is in aerospace engineering.
What does the future of clinical trials look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
Best analogy that I have in mind.
Welcome to Life Science Insights podcast. I am a Rose Sandal Karnanidhi. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Raviv Pryluk, CEO of PhaseV, with a strong background in AI, machine learning, and computational neuroscience. Raviv is leading innovation in how clinical trials are designed and optimized. In this episode, we will explore how AI is transforming clinical development and driving smarter, faster decisions in drug discovery. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Can you start by telling us a bit about your background?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's and master's in engineering and a PhD in computational neuroscience. Spent 16 years in other industries. Switched to biotech, been in fast-growing biotech, and we founded PhaseV roughly 4 years ago. I'm based in Boston, and yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, that's an interesting journey. Your background spans engineering, machine learning, and computational neuroscience. What was the defining moment that led you to start PhaseV?
So I think, when me and my co-founder Elad, when we were ideating and trying to think what company we want to found and where do we want to spend our, next decades, it was clear to us that we want to found a company that is going to have a huge and positive impact in the world. And we're ideating specifically in healthcare and climate. At the moment we landed in clinical trials, we felt that it checked all the boxes. It's the longest and most expensive part of drug development. It's a bottleneck per se. If you fix it, it has massive impact on patients. But also in my previous company, I was focused on discovery. And I still remember that when we were working with one of the big pharma companies back then, we had a very interesting breakthrough in discovery. And then we sat with this executive, and I remember he was telling me, Raviv, you realize that it's going to take more than 10 years before this molecule is going to cure patients.
Yes.
And I still remember I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, there are exciting results. Why should we wait 10 years before it gets to patients? And then I realized that clinical trials are broken. And I think, now is the time to fix it. So.
Okay, good. What core problem in clinical trials were you determined to solve when you founded PhaseV?
So when we started, we were analyzing the reasons why, this process is so inefficient and there's massive amounts of failures. And immediately we realized that clinical trials were very different from many other experiments that we are familiar with. If you think about gaming and dynamic public transportation and marketing, you are doing experiments, and if things are not working, you are changing as the experiment is conducted. You're doing exploration, exploitation. You change the course of action. But clinical trials, most of them, you submit a protocol and you wait till the end just to realize that the trial isn't working. It wasn't the right patient, it wasn't the right indication, it wasn't the right endpoint, and so on and so forth. So we said, what we need to focus is making clinical trials more dynamic, more adaptive. So our first module, our first platform was about supporting design of adaptive, Bayesian, dynamic clinical trials. That was the first module that we were focused at.
Okay, good. How does your background across different fields influence your approach in the science innovation?
So yeah, it's very interesting when my bachelor's and master's is in aerospace engineering. And I still remember when I applied to computational and neuroscience, I was keep getting the question, how your background in aerospace is relevant to computation and neuroscience, how learnings about airplanes is applicable to neurons in the brain. And I was keep saying that what you learn as an engineer are tools and methods and approaches in order to solve problems. So those tools were extremely applicable in order to questions that I was tackling in computational neuroscience. And similarly, I think a lot of the tools that I was leveraging in experimental design and execution in other domains are extremely applicable in clinical trials. And I think that engineering tools are widely applicable. And by design, by definition, the type of people that we're recruiting for PhaseV are multidisciplinary experts, and challenges like clinical trials has no boundaries of disciplinary or of disciplines, and you need to have people that has multidisciplinary capabilities and mindset, I will say. That's the only way to solve very complex and multidisciplinary problems.
That is true. I agree. You describe PhaseV as adaptive, casual, and intuitive. Can you break that down for our audience in simple terms?
Yeah, so adaptive, causal, intuitive. So if we think about adaptive, that's very much related to what I said in the beginning. We want to make clinical trials more adaptive, which means that if something is not working, we don't want to wait till patient number 1,000 before we change. If the dose is not right, if it's not 5 milligram and we need to make it 10 milligram, let's do it after 5 patients and not after 500 patients. So that's the nature of adaptive, changing things as they're not working or focusing on things that are working, the right dose, the right patient population, etc. That's the adaptive nature. Causal, we are not looking after correlation when something is increasing, another thing is increasing. We are looking for causal understanding. In biology, it's extremely important to really understand the causal connections, interactions between the drug and patients. That's the only way in order to develop drugs that are working at scale. And last but not least, it needs to be intuitive. We are developing AI, and if it's a black box, regulators, physicians, patients are not going to follow black box approach. We need to make things intuitive, opaque, clear. That's the intuitive nature. The recommendations, the algorithms, everything needs to be intuitive.
Okay, good. How does casual machine learning differ from the traditional AI approaches used in the clinical development today?
So if you think about the traditional approach, we are saying that we are after, correlation between signals. If some covariates, patient characteristics is associated with response, that's correlation. And that's interesting, that's relevant, but that's not enough. Because it could be the case that despite the fact that covariate A is associated with response, but this is mediated through another covariate, which means it's not age, it's actually specific biomarker that is related to age. But if you don't understand the real causal aspects, you can focus the drugs on the right patient population, the right sites, the right endpoint. And only whenever you are dealing with causal understanding, you are really increasing and dealing with the reasons that drugs are failing. Drugs are failing because we are not focusing on the right patients, on the right indications, on the right endpoint. And the causal reasoning, the causal aspect allows you to focus on things that are causally driven in response versus no response.
Okay, good. How do you define AI-driven clinical development optimization in practical, real-world terms?
So if you think about it, I mean, you are trying to connect causality into decisions, right? So for example, let's take one concrete task that we are supporting quite often, choosing the right sites, whether to go to a site in Dana-Farber or site in Ohio or site in Boston. It's not only a question about geography and operational parameters. You're going to meet different patients in different sites, and this has causal impact on placebo response, on response to treatment, on adverse events, and connecting the decision of which sites to choose to the causal aspects of response. This is how we are leveraging, and this is how we are connecting causal aspects into response and decisions.
Okay, good. PhaseV's trial optimizer claims to reduce cost by up to 50% and enrollment by 40%. What's happening under the hood to enable that?
Yeah, so first of all, it's not only claims, it's prospective proof points that we have in trials that we designed and conducted and analyzed. And this is driven by several parameters. For example, changing inclusion-exclusion criteria, right? So let's take very simple example of age that we discussed about before. What's the right cutoff? Whether to recruit patients above 60 or 62 or 58. This is something that can change dramatically, not only probability of success, but also operational characteristics. And having the right tools to determine this question, and this is just one example. There are biomarkers, genomics, metabolics, geographies, statistical parameters in the protocols, so many parameters to determine. So we have very sophisticated tools that are based on our data lake that is composed from millions and millions of patients from real-world data, clinical trials, publications that allows us to go back and forth between the question at hand and what's going to be the causal manifestations or impact of the specific decisions. So we have 4 core optimizers in our platform. Trial optimizer to support the design decision. What's the right protocol? CleanOps optimizer to support the right site selection and monitoring. Portfolio optimizer to support the indication selection and sequencing. And response optimizer to support the right patient characteristics, biomarker inclusion, exclusion criteria. And on top of that, we have AI conductor to generate the protocol statistical analysis plan and code. And collectively, the 4 optimizers and the conductor allows us to achieve dramatic reduction in cost, increase of probability of success, and cutting time to market.
Okay. Good to know. How do you balance statistical rigor with the real-world constraints in the trial design?
Oh, that's a very important question, because what we see quite often is that AI companies out there are neglecting the importance of statistical rigorousness, right? I mean, if you have a black box and you are not justifying the statistical guarantees, the p-value, the type 1 error, assurance, you name it, no matter if you are a frequentist or taking the Bayesian approach, you have to make sure that you have statistical guarantees. And if you don't have it, regulators are not going to accept it, and statisticians are not going to follow these recommendations. And in order to do so, we are making sure that we have a layer of statistical guarantees in our algorithm. So every recommendation that we are providing, we are also doing the multiplicity control or calculating whether it's analytically or computationally, empirically, the type 1 error, p-value, etc. And this is fundamental. And whenever we have a recommendation that doesn't follow this, first, we are communicating this very, very transparently. And B, we are assigning certainty or uncertainty level to every recommendation based on this. And this is gaining trust and confidence from the sponsors and regulators.
Okay, good. Can you share a real-world example where your platform significantly changed the outcome or a direction of a trial?
Yeah, so let me share 3 quick examples. One, reducing placebo effects. So as you know, in many therapeutic areas, immunology, neuroscience, and many others, we have high placebo rates, which means that let's assume that we have a randomized controlled trial, right? We have a drug and we have placebo, which means that patients are not getting anything. Just by participating in clinical trials, patients are responding, real clinical response, due to the fact that they think that they are getting a drug. And this mask the true effect of the drug, because basically we are comparing the drug to a placebo effect that is, when reducing the two, it's minimizing the perceived effect of the drug. So what happens is that this placebo effect is sensitive to so many parameters. One of the parameters is geographies. So, for example, different sites, different countries would create different placebo responses. So the ability to surface the impact of different parameters on placebo response and take it into account in the way you are designing and conducting the trial, this is extremely important in many therapeutic areas, but especially in immunology and neuroscience. So we had a specific phase 3 trial that we recommended how to do the geographical site selection in order to avoid biases in placebo response. The sponsors followed the recommendation, and immediately you see that they got the right mixture representation of placebo response that allowed this drug to be approved and not masking the real impact of the drug. And there's a long conversation about how making sure that this is not biasing the results, etc. There are a lot of statistical guarantees behind it, but that's one concrete example. Another concrete example is the transition between phase 2 and phase 3 and finding the right biomarker. So you have results in phase 2. They seem to be encouraging, but we all know that this means that you have only 50% probability of success onwards. So how to find the right patient populations that are going to respond and focusing only on them moving to phase 3. And the last example that I want to give is Bayesian dose finding design. So we are involved a lot, and the FDA recently encouraged and endorsed a lot of Bayesian designs, a lot of oncology Bayesian designs in order to find the right dose. So we are creating Bayesian design, BOIN or BLRM or other designs that are helping to pick the right dose that finds the right balance between efficacy and toxicity. Usually it was thought that it's linear relationship, but today we realize that it's non-linear, and Bayesian designs allow you to find this non-linear sweet spot more efficiently, faster, with less patients that are exposed to inefficient drugs.
Okay, that's really a good one. Clinical trials are slow and expensive. What are the biggest inefficiencies you see today?
So, to name a few, there are a couple. Patient recruitment, massive challenge. Sponsors are, submitting the protocol, they have the drug, and it's so hard to recruit patients. We have a lot of exciting solutions for that. Another one is the process itself. How much time it takes you to develop the protocol and to analyze the data. For that, we recently released the AI Conductor. This is a game changer. It makes the process extremely more efficient, more accurate, and more collaborative across various stakeholders. So these two that I want to highlight.
Okay. Good. How can AI and ML platforms like PhaseV help de-risk clinical development for biotech and pharma companies?
So I think essentially it allows to de-risk the 6 most common reasons why clinical trials are failing. It's not the right patient population. It's not the right indication. Asthma versus COPD, type 2 diabetes versus obesity, breast cancer versus non-small cell lung cancer, and so on and so forth. It's not the right dose, 10 milligrams versus 5 milligrams, as we were discussing before. It's not the right trial design, statistical parameters, number of patients, etc. The trial wasn't executing appropriately, sites, monitoring, conduct, and we are not leveraging the totality of the data. These are the 6 reasons for most of the failures, and this is today preventable with AI, machine learning, and statistical guarantees.
Okay. Do you see the regulators becoming more open to AI-driven trial design and optimization?
So it's extremely excited to see what's going on today with the FDA and other regulatory agencies. Almost every couple of weeks, they're releasing another guidance, another announcement, another pilot, but it's not only documents. We see the change real time in meetings with regulators, in approvals, in discussions, in committees. The change is enormous. We've never seen something like this. The regulators are not only encouraging and endorsing, they're pushing sponsors to change, to be more innovative, to be more ethical, to involve technology, to use AI. these are exciting times to be an AI player in the clinical development space.
Yes, that's true.
Extremely exciting.
Yeah, exciting. Yes, true. What role does interpretability play in your platform, especially for non-technical stakeholders?
So this is a very good question and very relevant to intuitive part that we discussed before. I mean, if you get a recommendation, whether it's a change in the protocol, changing the footprint or site strategy, changing endpoint, any recommendation that is relevant to the clinical development, if you don't understand the reasoning, the justification, the citation, the grounding for this recommendation, you won't follow it. No sponsors, no regulators, you won't. And you have to understand it has to be intuitive, it has to have clinical justification, regulatory justifications. This is extremely, extremely key, and black box solutions won't work in this space.
Okay. How do you handle data variability and bias across different trial populations?
So there are several measures that we are taking. One, because we have a huge data lake, we are constantly comparing and making sure the results are consistent. The second piece is a lot of the algorithmic approach that we are taking does internal validation for consistency, train, test, holdout, multiplicity control, etc. But last but not least, some of the insights are indeed applicable to certain patients, but not to others. And this is fine as long as you can justify. Not all drugs are working for everyone. It's not one size fits all. You and I are going to respond differently to drugs. And if you know it, and if you approve it in a statistical rigorous fashion, that's valuable. We want to know it, right? So this is some, insights on this very, very important topic.
Okay. Good. As a CEO leading both technology and operations, how do you balance innovation with execution?
Yeah, first of all, honesty, it's a very difficult task.
Yes.
It's a constant debate, and there's no right and wrong. When you need to push for like more innovation, more product development versus executing on, the project that you have on your plate now. I think open dialogue with the leadership, open communication across various stakeholders, but again, I'm not sure that I have the perfect solution. Just
Okay.
being open and constantly discussing with smart people that we
Smart
have
people.
in the company. That's the approach that we are
Yeah,
taking.
that's true. Yes. What has been your biggest leadership challenge while scaling PhaseV?
I think definitely scaling fast enough
Hmm.
while maintaining the same highest or high talent density. So like PhaseV team is incredible, highly motivated, super, super smart, low ego, and keep hiring and growing fast while maintaining the same quality. It's a very, very difficult task. I mean, we have a lot of things that we are doing and a lot of
Okay.
progress and success there, but it's challenging. So
Right.
yeah.
How do you build teams that can operate across disciplines like AI, biology, and clinical research?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, let's start by, answering what type of people we are recruiting to PhaseV. And I think it's very much related to the question, right? How you bring, multidisciplinary, cross disciplines, and such difficult and different disciplines, right? So I think what's very common to vast majority of the PhaseV employees is that all of them are highly professional, low ego, motivated by impact, by doing something positive, and they're winners. At the end of the day, they want to solve, they want to win, they want to see the results, the outcome. And I think whenever you bring such a blend of incredible people, that's the way to deal with the multidisciplinary challenge of AI, biology, clinical trials. I think there are a lot of commonalities between these type of personalities.
Personalities. Okay. What does the future of clinical trials look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
The best analogy that I have in mind
Hmm.
is Waze or Google Maps. So instead of having clinical trials that you submit the protocol and wait and you have phases and it's so long and tedious, we have a map and we are navigating and changing and getting notifications. There's a traffic jam, there's police, here, and all those insights that are happening along the way allows you to navigate the development and like finding the right match between drugs and patients. So that's the future that
That's a
I
question.
see.
Okay. Do you envision a world where trials become significantly smarter, faster, and more personalized?
100%. That's where we are going. I will say that still there are going to be cases that big trials, many patients, very traditional, will be the right solution. But in many cases, we'll see more personalized, smaller, faster trials.
More and faster.
Definitely.
Okay.
100%.
How will AI reshape the economics of drug development?
So I think it's very much aligned with the PhaseV vision. Today, we are talking about 10 years from beginning of clinical trial journey of a drug till it gets to patients, on average, a 90% failure rate. It's going to change from 10 years to 1 year, and it's going to change from 90% failure to 90% success. That's where we are going. That's where we are heading, and that's the vision of PhaseV.
Okay, good. I have 4 rapid fire questions. The one myth about AI in clinical trials.
That AI is replacing clinical judgment or judgment in general. Actually, it's not. It's augmenting. It's empowering experts to be better. It's the joke that, AI is not going to replace clinical trialists. It's going to replace those that are not using AI by those who are using AI, right? That's where we are going.
Okay. One habit that defines your leadership style.
I think debrief. Keep asking why. Why this meeting went right? Why this meeting went wrong? Why this bug happened? Why we signed this deal? Why we lost this deal? Keep asking why and keep learning and improving.
Okay. A book or idea that influenced your thinking recently.
An idea. Actually, very much related to the previous question. I think the concept of micro pivots, right? I mean, people are talking about doing pivots in startups. Pivot means that you had one idea and you are changing the idea because it wasn't the right idea or there's bigger prize somewhere else. I believe in micro pivots, which means that every day we are doing debrief, we are learning, and we are doing small changes, micro pivots.
Yes.
And when you do micro pivots, you're constantly on track to the bigger vision without the need to do abrupt changes. Time to time, abrupt changes are needed, but I think most of them are preventable if you are keep listening to the market, to clients, to changes, and you're doing micro pivots.
Okay. If PhaseV succeeds at scale, what changes most in the world?
So we were talking about the 90% failure to success and the 10 to 1. The implication is very direct. More innovative, successful drugs are going to get to patients who need them the most. And basically, so many people are suffering across the world from different devastating, conditions and diseases. And this is going to have massive and positive impact for the better on our families, on our friends, on the society as a whole. So,
okay. We are at the end of the conversation. If you could leave our audience with one insight about the future of adaptive, casual, and intuitive clinical development, what would it be?
I think the insight would be that, counter to no one was ever being fired for buying an IBM.
Hmm.
Now is the time to think innovatively, to be open and embrace the change. It's happening. You have to join, you have to embrace it with, careful considerations, statistical guarantees, intuitiveness, and so on and so forth, all the things that we discussed about. But now is the time to embrace innovation, to embrace AI in clinical development. So,
Okay, good. So, thanks for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. It was truly an interesting and an insightful discussion. And thank you again for your time and for sharing your expertise with us.
thank you for great questions and dialogue. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed as well. So, thank you.